Lisa Rye presents a special You've Been Framed in half an hour, celebrating the joys of childhood. First on HTV, for the last time, Bill Bryson's notes.
I don't understand most things. I truly don't. I don't understand how anyone ate the first oyster. I don't understand why, when the phone rings, someone always says, "Is that the phone?" I don't understand why the more hair I lose off the top of my head, the more grows in my nostrils. I don't understand why the less leather there is in a woman's shoe, the more it costs. I don't know why when you go away on holiday there's always a heat wave at home. I don't understand why planes, trains, and buses are always on time when you are late, and always late when you are on time. I don't even know how my own body works. I've been carrying a spleen around for nearly half a century, and I don't have the faintest idea where it is or what it does. I wouldn't know my own endocrine glands if they reached out and goosed me. I do know that when I look at the British countryside, it's very beautiful, but I don't know how it got that way. Writer and adventurer Redmond O'Hanlon knows more about what makes the British landscape than anyone I know.
Something I've always wondered is why are all the geological terms British?
Oh, well, the whole of biology and geology, and you could say science at a pinch, began in England. It began looking at a landscape just like this.
Really?
Rolling, gentle chalkland. And it was a world that was started officially in 1802 by the Archdeacon of Carlisle, William Paley, who wrote a book called Natural Theology. And it goes, look, God made everything. So if you want to come close to God and understand his ways, all you have to do is study his creation. It meant that all the parsons in the parish could happily get on collecting insects. If God made everything, then you made a series of collections of earwigs, birds' eggs, everything got classified. And it was part of religion. It was much more fun than going to visit your parishioners. It's a theology born in a garden, really. And the tragedy of it all was that when the Origin came out in 1859, the only people who were really qualified to understand the argument were the very people that were psychologically destroyed by it. You know, this gentle landscape, we're looking at a tragedy in the 1860s, suicide rate amongst clergymen. So, Bill, now you've left this place, I mean, exiled yourself abroad to America, what do you miss most? And I don't want to hear about television programs. I mean, is there a special landscape that you...
I miss all of it. I mean, I miss the way that the landscape is so intricately worked.
Yes.
And that there's all the little details of it. Because, I mean, in the States, it's all on so much larger a canvas.
It's not just the landscape, I might add. There are lots of things in Britain that are special in much the same way. Take the famous and much-loved Ffestiniog Railway in North Wales. Completed in 1836, it is one of the oldest narrow-gauge railway lines in the world. Thousands of people come every year to watch its shunting engines and to gaze gravely but rapturously at breastplates, firebeds, hoppers, and coupling devices. If there are people in the world who can get genuinely excited about boiler pressures and camshaft ratios, will forever be a source of wonder to me. I like the Ffestiniog Railway not so much for how it works, as for what it represents, namely a certain knack by the British for being ingenious and sensible at the same time. There aren't many people in the world who can do this. The British, when they do it well, do it very well indeed. As with the Ffestiniog line. When it was built, it was unquestionably a wonder of the age, It was progressive and modern and scientific, and it brought significant economic benefits to the region. But it also represented a more general improvement. It brought a touch of class and elegance to the mountainous terrain through which it passed. It was a gleaming symbol of progress, but it was also just nice. The little bridges and viaducts and out-of-the-way stations didn't overwhelm their setting. They snuggled into it. In fact, they complete it. The Ffestiniog Railway was nice to look at and ride on then. It's nice to look at and ride on now. It's safe to presume that the people who built the railway 163 years ago didn't have it in mind that one day it would make a jolly nice day out for trippers. But it does. So much so, in fact, that everyone on board except me stayed on for the return journey. Maybe they'd been to Blaenau before. The Ffestiniog Railway was built to serve the slate industry, which is not, it must be said, the tidiest of enterprises. The village of Blaenau stands in a steep defile, surrounded by massive, unearthly heaps of rejected slate. You get the impression that they were either not very good at it, or very fussy. When I first came here, it was in a wintry downpour on a Sunday afternoon, and Blaenau was about as unpromising a place as I had ever seen. Today, under blue skies, it's better, but only just. Much more to my liking is Llandudno, where everything is on a modest scale, including, it seems, the pets. There isn't much to do here. That's what's so nice about it.
One of the great charms of the British is that they get so much from small pleasures. Give them a cup of tea and a biscuit, and they go, ooh, lovely. Ask them if they fancy a run out to the garden center, and they grab their coats and hats. No one on earth gets more from less, and nowhere more so than at the seaside, where it's possible to do nothing at all and still think you're having a wonderful time.
A lot of people would say there isn't much to do in Llandudno, but that's not true. You can sit on the shingle. You can sit in a shelter. You can sit in the sun and have a chat, or in the shade and not. What they are all waiting for, of course, is that galvanizing moment when someone finally says, "Fancy a cup of tea?" If someone didn't say it, they would have to stay there forever. The ability to find genuine excitement in a modestly flavorful beverage is something which unites the English, Scots and Welsh.
Chocolate eclairs fi da fan ydyn ni.
A bara brief, David.
Syniad go lew.
Anyone?
Ie, grêt, o'n i fynd am munud.
Where I come from, fun usually involves equipment and commotion and noise and money, pushing the senses and your pocket to the limit. Here, pleasure comes from much smaller pursuits. You stretch your legs, have a stroll, take in the air. Do you see what I mean? You're the only people to elevate respiration to a pastime, and I mean that as a compliment. Britain is the only place where hotels advertise hot and cold water as a feature. The British are the only people in the world who think of jam and currants as thrilling constituents of a cake. The only people in the world who believe that you can turn a sausage into a canapé by putting a toothpick through it. The only people who would think of bowls as a spectator sport. It would be unkind of me to say that they are the only people in the world who could possibly be entertained by a man passing a candle through his forearm, or nicking a lady's handbag and hiding it on the other side of the room. But it is so. And here's the really strange thing. I love it. Britain is benign and beguiling, so it comes as a shock when you stumble upon something dangerous and life-threatening, like Morecambe Bay. It doesn't look particularly treacherous, but it's not somewhere to stretch your legs alone.
He told me to meet him on the beach.
He being one Cedric Robinson, an employee of the Queen as Royal Keeper of the Sands, a man who can keep you alive.
Seen horses go down in quicksand. The tide comes in, covers the horse completely. But the buoyancy of the horse and struggling brings them up to the surface. Then they swim out to the side.
Wow.
It's wonderful, really, that they can do that, but you can't do that with a tractor, you see. They just go farther down.
So have you seen tractors go under?
Oh, yes, in my lifetime I've seen several. One gorgeous moonlight night I was out in the bay and a fisherman was following behind. And he went in what we call the Melgrave and well, we've never seen that tractor again. But out on the bed like this, as we're looking, dry sand like this could still be quicksands.
Really?
And
But I just started walking here and discovered I was in quicksand. Could I scamper out again, or would I get...
Well, the thing, if you find yourself on quicksand and you find yourself going in, the thing is to spread your weight, lie flat, and by doing that, you'll escape going down. But if you're just to stand there and freeze, that's when the trouble is, you would go straight down.
Really?
Quite a number of years ago, I was planning the route to bring Prince Philip across the Sand with horse and carriages. And on the same day, there was a young girl came out on a thoroughbred horse, and her mother was right, she was running alongside. And they come to the river, crossed, because I'd marked it out and it was a shallow river, and then there was a stretch of sand just like this. And the day previously I'd been up that stretch of sand, all new sand. It was treacherous, one mass of quicksand. And this young lad, they saw this lovely dry sand, they thought they would go for a gallop. And she shouted to her mother, "It's all right, Mum." I shouted and screamed my head off. I said, "Stop, stop." If they'd gone on, that would have been it. It would have gone right down. It would have been all day getting that horse out. But you see, it looked so safe with being dry. And I knew, you know, by being in the area the day previous, I knew that it wasn't.
I got the message and wandered back behind Cedric, leaving the sands of Morecambe Bay to their own deceptively beautiful and dangerous secrets. As long as you don't go potholing during a rainstorm or scale Snowdon in carpet slippers in February, then there really are very few areas of natural danger in Britain. No Everglades, Death Valley, downtown Washington, D.C. The landscape doesn't overwhelm you with its power or size. Like British pleasures, its attractions are nicely small scale.
Put the Thames down in North America and it wouldn't even make it into the top 100. And Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in Britain, would barely feature at all. New Hampshire alone has at least 8 peaks that are as high or higher. But that's not the point. This isn't about size or records. It's about being just right.
That isn't to say there isn't grandeur in Britain. There's grandeur aplenty. It's just that it's on a more manageable scale. Let me put this in perspective for you. My new home in New England is closer to my old home in Yorkshire than it is to the most westerly point of the American mainland. From New Hampshire to Los Angeles is about the same distance as from London to Lagos. Here, people call their auto club for route maps and check their tire pressures before driving the sort of distances we would go to get a taco. Distances here are trifling, especially if you were brought up in somewhere like Iowa, where you can drive for half a day without need of your indicator. But of course, travel is a different sort of commodity in Britain. Only in the north of Scotland does the openness allow distance to be seen and taken in at a glance, like on a journey to Thurso, the mainland's most northern town. Getting to grips with journey times is one thing. Understanding the weather is another. I have a small tattered clipping I sometimes carry with me and pull out for purposes of private amusement. It's a weather forecast from the Western Mail, and it says, in toto, "Outlook dry and warm, but cooler with some rain." There you have in a single pithy sentence the British weather captured to perfection. The Western Mail could run that forecast every day. For all I know, it may, and scarcely ever be wrong. The remarkable thing to me about the British weather is not how reliably inclement it is, but that I'm the only person who seems to have noticed. I can't count the number of times I've heard a Briton look out the window and say, with genuine surprise, "Oh, would you look at all that rain?" That's like an Eskimo sticking his head out of his igloo and saying, "Oh, would you look at all that snow?" It's not something that really ought to surprise you. The nice thing about bad weather in Britain is that it doesn't last long. This shower ended after 3 weeks. I've said it many times before, but one of the most impressive things about Britain to me is how much incident and achievement is packed onto such a small canvas. Speaking as someone who comes from a state whose greatest contribution to the happiness and comfort of mankind was the invention of a machine for detasseling corn, I can't help but be impressed by the wealth of inventiveness in Britain. There is so much of this sort of thing, in fact, that much of it is completely forgotten and overlooked. In the tiny hamlet of Wotton, just outside Thurso, there once lived a man whose achievements, had he been born in Iowa, would be celebrated yet.
You come along to see your Bain clock, have you?
Yes, wonderful. Now, when did he invent this?
It is reputed to be at 1845 when he was working in Edinburgh. And this was the first electric clock in the world to be kept going by the impulses of an electric magnet. Originally it worked on an earth battery.
The clock is maintained by Hector Sinclair, a sort of voluntary timekeeper.
So this is the oldest electric clock in the world?
That is reputed to be the oldest electric clock in the world. The first one to be kept going with the electric impulses of a permanent pole magnet and the solenoid.
What kind of background did he come from?
Alexander Bain was the son of a crofter, a big family of 10 up in the moors above Wotton here, in a place called Linmore.
Did Bain make a lot of money out of this?
Bain died in poverty.
Did he?
Yes.
Why?
Why? Because so many people wanted to copy his patents, and it cost him quite a lot of money legally to fight his side.
But he invented a number of other things as well, didn't he?
He was the inventor of the electric teleprinter, which was a forerunner of the fax machine.
No kidding.
Aye. So he's responsible for the fax machine.
Why do you think the Scots are so inventive?
Because they're Scots. That's the best reason.
One of the cleverest bits of Scottish ingenuity is the ability to attract people from all over the world to travel to and experience virtually nothing. The almost most northerly point of mainland Britain, John o' Groats. The little port was named after a 16th century Dutch ferryman who in turn derived his name from the groat he charged to carry people the 8 miles to Orkney. There's still a ferry, but 95% of the people who travel to the spot do so purely to fulfill some inner spiritual desire to touch the edge. And remarkably, they were not all British. I heard Canadian, New Zealand, and Korean accents. There were cars from Germany, Sweden, France, Spain, Holland, even Monte Carlo, as well as from every corner of Britain. They'd driven for hours, days, to wander about for minutes to get a photograph to secure the moment, and then get back in their cars and drive southward. Even the piper migrates the length of Europe to perform, and once his sporran is full, flies south to winter in Malta. I'm tempted to think, how canny these Scots, except that this piper is from somewhere closer to Dunstable than Dundee. The truth is that the whole place has an identity crisis. It doesn't know whether to be first or last, whether it is coming or going. Despite that, there's a continuous flow of people willing to head to this remote corner simply to visit the last house. And afterwards, perhaps, buy a last burger and fries. What many of them fail to do is take the short walk up what might be marketed as the last set of steps, where you spot a headland ahead of you further north. The truth is that all John o' Groats is the most northerly John o' Groats. Further north you have the castle of May, the most northerly royal home, and a mile further north from there is Dunnet Head, the actual most northerly point on mainland Great Britain. Dunnet is uncelebrated and stunning, a sheer 400 feet from top to bottom as the Bird's Egg falls. It is the black basalt cousin of the grey slate of North Wales, and equal of the much-adored white chalk cliffs I wandered along just 549 miles due south.
Now that's what I call a big ending to a small island.
And no small part of that small island do I miss more than the Yorkshire Dales, which were home for my last 8 years in England. The Dales encapsulate all that held me in the country for a quarter of a century, when I only came for a fortnight. They are wild without terror, beauty without vanity. The Settle to Carlisle Railway is a bit like that too. It's the most celebrated obscure railway line in the world, a supreme act of folly. In 1870, James Allport, general manager of the Midland Railway, took it into his head to build a main line north. There already were west and east coast lines, so he decided to drive one up the middle, even though it went from nowhere much to nowhere much, by way of nothing at all. Because the line went through an insanely bleak and forbidding stretch of the Pennines, Allport's engineers had to come up with all kinds of contrivances to make it work, including 20 viaducts and 12 tunnels. It cost £3.5 million, which in Victorian England was an awful lot of single tickets. When we announced to friends and colleagues in London that we were moving to a village in Yorkshire, a surprising number made a face and said, "Yorkshire? What with Yorkshire people? How very interesting," or words to that effect. I like Yorkshire folk. I've always found them to be decent and open, and if you want to know your shortcomings, you won't find more helpful people anywhere. It's true that they don't exactly smother you with affection, which takes a little getting used to if you hail from a more gregarious part of the world, like anywhere else. But gradually, little by little, they find a corner for you in their hearts and begin to acknowledge you when they drive past with what I call the Mallandale Wave. To make the Mallandale Wave, pretend for a moment that you are grasping a steering wheel. Now very slowly extend the index finger of your right hand as if you were having a small, involuntary spasm. That's it. It doesn't look like much, but it speaks volumes, believe me. I miss it very much. The truth is, I miss so much of it. Marmite, village fates, country lanes, people saying, "Mustn't grumble," and "I'm terribly sorry, but," people apologizing to me when I conk them with a careless elbow, milk bottles, beans on toast, haymaking in June, stinging nettles, seaside piers, ordnance survey maps, crumpets, hot water bottles as a necessity, drizzly Sundays, every bit of it.
The fact is, this is still the best place in the world for most things. To post a letter, go for a walk, watch television, buy a book, stand on a hillside and take in a view. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I like it here. I like it more than I can tell you.
Well, if you would like more information from all of Bill Bryson's programmes, you can visit the website on www.itv.co.uk.